Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Welcome back to our video PowerPoint series here for biology. Today we're going to be talking about classification and moving into our second unit, which is kingdoms and classification. So, to go ahead and get things started, we're going to talk a little bit about classification, the history of it, and ultimately what it is. So, by definition, classification is the system that groups organisms together based on common features they share. So, as we progress throughout the slides here, we'll figure out a little bit more about that, and eventually, you should have a grasp of the taxonomic kingdoms and categories before today is over. Well, let's just go ahead and get started, shall we? I'll see you on the next slide. So, the first gentleman that we're going to talk about today is Aristotle. So Aristotle was a philosopher, but also he was the first man to develop a system to classify organisms. He had two kingdoms, and based off the photos, can you figure out what they are? Well, I can guarantee it's not leafy things and hippos. He divided each kingdom into subcategories. So his plants, he based on the division of size. So he broke it up into how large they were. So herbs and smaller plants were one category. Shrubbery, shrubs and other things like small leafy fixtures were a second category. And trees and other tall plant life were all classified under a third category. Now animals, on the other hand, were based upon the division of habitat. So he broke it up into air, land, and sea. So we had animals that lived in the air, animals that lived on land, and animals that lived in the sea. Now, at the time, this was fantastic, but there was a huge error here that Aristotle didn't quite factor in. Do you guys know what that is? Can you figure it out? I'll give you a second. It's a little thing I like to call the duck paradox. So here, behold, we have a duck. Now the duck, it can fly through the air, waddle on land, and swim in the sea. So here we go. I'm sure that Aristotle saw this. He's like, wait, hang on. Everything I knew, it's wrong. So, this goes ahead and shows you that we have a little bit of modification that needs to occur for our taxonomic categories. We can't just go by size and where they're found. Enter a gentleman by the name of Carolus Linnaeus. He improved the classification system by basing his grouping off of physical features that organisms had. So Linnaeus introduced the universal name or binomial nomenclature. So what happened here is all organisms were given a universal name, primarily in Latin, which were used by all scientists. And now this is incredibly helpful when many different common names are used. So common names, think of it like this. We've got a jaguar, a puma, a mountain lion, a cougar, all of which are corresponding to large mountain cats. So the binomial nomenclature, the two naming system, is composed of both a first and last name, very similar to, well, us. We have a first and last name. It's composed of the genus. So the genus is capitalized and comes first. Meanwhile, the species, the second part of the name, is lowercase and comes second. Both names are underlined. For example, we have the Toliputes moticus, which is the scientific name for the three-banded armadillo. So we have the genus Toliputes and the species Moticus. So as you can see, genus is capitalized, species is lowercase, and though they're not underlined, if you're typing it up, you can also italicize these. So common names are a little misleading. So like we said right here, we have a cougar. Or is it a puma? Or maybe a mountain lion. So puma, cougar, mountain lion, all corresponding to the same organism. And here, what do we have? That's right, we have a seahorse, but a seahorse isn't a horse, it's a fish. So some common names can be a little misleading. So the scientific name here, first off, we've got this creature to our right. This is a bat. Specifically, it is the Myotis macrotarsus. So meaning mouse-eared bat with big feet. So if you go ahead and take a look at the ears, it's got relatively small curved ears, like a mouse. However, if you go ahead and look at the feet are quite large for an organism this size. So that's where we get macrotarsus, corresponding to big feet. A cat. So a cat's scientific name, the genus is Felis. Any idea what the species is going to be? Depending on which one you're looking at, we have Felis domesticus, which is the house cat, or we have Felis sylvestris, which is the wild cat. For humans, I think we all know this one, but for the genus name for human is Homo, and the species is sapien. So we are Homo sapiens. Oh my goodness! Look at the majesty! The pure, unbridled fury and beauty. This organism, one of my personal favorites, is a great white shark. So it's found in the kingdom Animalia. So Animalia, these are mobile critters that have many cells and can't make their own food. So up to this point, are we just the same, taxonomically, as sharks? That's right, we are. The phylum would be Chordata. Chordata means a flexible skeletal rod with accompanying nerves. So this means they have a backbone and spinal column. Once again, we also have this. So far we're in the same boat as the shark, metaphorically speaking. The class is Chondrichthyes. It's a fish with a cartilaginous skeleton. So, cartilage is what your nose and ears are made out of. It's made of relatively flexible, almost rubbery-like bones. Or not bones, but something close to it. So now we're not really in the same boat as the shark anymore. We have the order, which is Laminiformes, which is the mackerel shark. So mackerel sharks are primarily built for speed. They're supposed to go ahead and hit whatever they're going after like a missile. Once again, the family is Laminidae, corresponding to the mackerel sharks, and the genus is called Carcharodon. So Carcharodon is from the Greek word karcharos, which means ragged or pointed. And odon means tooth. So Carcharodon corresponds to ragged or pointed tooth. The species is Carcharius, which means shark in Greek. So Carcharodon carcharius basically just means ragged or pointed tooth shark. Oh man, that picture is awesome. So the modern classification system uses the Linnaean system based off of physical characteristics. However, it also adds the comparison of body chemistry and developmental features. For example, we take a look and bring into account the DNA sequence, the cytochrome C, the hemoglobin, and the developmental stages of the embryos. So we go ahead and look at the genetic basis, what's inside their body, and we also take a look at how they develop and grow over time. So you see that little alien-looking thing down in the lower left-hand corner? That is an embryo. It could be a chicken, a reptile, a shark. Well, maybe not a shark, but you get the point. Now, some organisms have actually been reclassified into different taxonomic categories. For example, this little fellow is a horseshoe crab. So you would automatically think, well, it's got to be closely related to a crab, right? Wrong. It's actually more closely related to spiders and arachnids. if you go ahead and take a look at this thing underneath the little shell here, you'll find that it actually looks just like a spider, or very similar to it. Now, fun fact, that little tail that's coming off the back end, this guy right here. Now, contrary to popular belief, horseshoe crabs are not poisonous. Not at all, actually. I mean, I still wouldn't go grabbing it by the tail. Those things are pretty sharp. But they're not poisonous at all. What those tails are actually used to do here is very often these things get washed up on the shore, up on the beach. And when they do, they sometimes land upside down on their shells, kicking their tiny little feet up into the air with no avail. So what they'll do is they'll go ahead and dig that tail into the sand and use it as a lever to flip themselves over. The next organism we're going to be looking at is the panda bear. Yeah, pandas. So the panda, panda bear, must closely be related to a bear, right? Not quite. They're actually more closely related to raccoons. If you go ahead and if you ever heard of a red panda, if you haven't, go ahead and really quick look it up. I'm sure you've got a phone, you can do this real quick. But the red panda actually looks like a raccoon. So our modern classification system. For domains, we have eubacteria. Kingdoms, or in the domain eubacteria, we have the kingdom eubacteria, which are prokaryotic bacteria. In the domain archaea, we have the kingdom archaebacteria, which are extremophiles, which we'll get more into in the next lesson here. In the domain eukarya, this contains 4 kingdoms: the protista, the fungi, the plants, and the animals. So, the classification groups, also known as taxa, are as follows. We have domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So the mnemonic device, once again, we're talking about these a lot, the mnemonic device is called Dear King Philip Came Over for Ginger Snaps. Or you don't like ginger snaps, that's fine. Go with Dear King Philip Came Over for Good Sushi. Or maybe he came over for grape soda. Doesn't matter, as long as you remember it. Now, each division contains fewer organisms but shares more features in common. So think of these categories like a giant funnel. Very broad at the top, and then gradually we go ahead and get more and more specific and narrow until we get down to one species of organism. Think back to the shark. We started off with all the animals in the kingdom Animalia, and we gradually went ahead and narrowed it down until we got specifically the great white shark. So the taxa continued here. Domain is the largest taxa. Domain can be found right here at the top. Domain contains 1 or more kingdoms. So the domain contains the most organisms. Now each kingdom is then subdivided into a phylum, a class, an order, a family, a genus, and a species. The species, found down here, contains the fewest organisms but has the most physical features in common. So if we go ahead and run down through this here, we have a panther or a jaguar. So what we have, we start off with the domain Eukarya, which is all organisms that have a nucleus, the kingdom Animalia, animals, the phylum Chordata, anything with a backbone, the class is Mammalia, organisms that primarily have hair and produce milk, order Carnivora, so carnivore, family Felidae, cats, genus Panthera, and species Pardus. So we're talking specifically about the jaguar here. So based off of these 3 animals that were given, which 2 animals do you think are most closely related? Remember, start off at the top and work your way down. I'll give you a little bit of time here. So if you look closely here, everything is the same for all three of our animals, or our three organisms here. Same kingdom, they're all in the kingdom Animalia. The phylum, once again, same thing, they're all in Chordata, or chordates. But if you go ahead and take a look at our next section here, the class, we have two that are in the class Aves and one that is in the class Mammalia or mammals. So we've got, if we continue down here, Aves, Passeriformes, Fringillidae, Fringillidae, Spizella, and Serenus. So what we have here, these are two different types of birds. Meanwhile, over here, primates, Pongidae, Pan, and Troglodytes, this would be a chimp. So the two organisms that are the most closely related are animal B and animal C. Now, what happens if you go ahead and come across an organism in the wild that you don't quite know what it is? So there are certain ways you can identify this unknown organism. You can use something called a field guide. A field guide goes ahead and provides a wide variety of different photos of organisms that you might find in your area. The second option is to go ahead and use the dichotomous key. Dichotomous keys are composed of statements with two opposite parts or categories. So does it have this? Yes or no. Does it have wings? Yes or no. Does it have spots? Yes or no. You would go ahead and choose the statement that is true about the unknown organism. You would continue to do this until you eventually reach and figure out the name of your unknown creature. So, in summary, today we talked a little bit about classification, the history of it, the different taxonomic categories, and what they all mean. So with that brings this lesson to a close. Thank you all for joining us today, and I will see you in the next episode. Until then, you all keep it classy.